everyone, it's Jen again. This week I had a request to make a video on how I start creating a game project and what I've learned from my previous projects. And I know I've spoken about it in the past that working on this side game for Arcane Dice Wars has kind of taught me a lot that I wanted to go back and change with the original Arcane Dice Wars. And so if I look at my original document, so this is where I always start with a project, is I start by kind of just putting out my ideas. In this case with Arcane Dice Wars, it was my first attempt to creating a turn-based combat system. So a lot of my early notes were about how that combat system was going to work out, the character stats that would affect combat, and kind of my ideas for what I thought the elite skill triggers would be, and a list of the assets that I think I will need, and then just little story overview. And the story summary is usually very short. I'm usually thinking of the story sort of in chapters. So if we look at my actual project, you can see that these folders are the broken up by chapters, and then the folders that don't have this kind of chapter number written on them are locations and systems that periodically get referenced to outside of the chapter, or throughout the chapters, I guess I should say. So we have things like the combat system type stuff. We have the castle, which is a hub, kind of a home hub location for daily activities. We have the menu systems, the map systems, animation, character sprite animations here, and stuff like that. As well as the chat dialogue for the different bonding conversations with the different characters are in a separate folder, along with the warfare scripts. So yeah, that's kind of how I break down the story, since my games are very narrative heavy. One of the things that I've learned from working on A Villain's Heart was that the original project idea, if I go back to this, my original project idea for it was I think kind of starting here, and I knew what characters I was going to focus on, and originally it was just going to be 3 chapters within the endings, and then the endings were going to be I think 5 endings or something, and that ended up being probably double the size and story that I was planning originally, and it still feels like a really short game to me. I would say that I consciously was trying to condense the just the building of the relationships, the story, the conflict, and all that kind of stuff. I feel like I was going at breakneck speed. But really, I don't think it feels too rushed, so I'm actually quite pleased with the overall pacing, and I'm glad that I filled it in with more chapters, because I think that it would have definitely felt too fast or too rushed if I had tried to tell the story in just the 3 chapters. And that's one huge advantage that you have, or that I have, I should say, as basically a solo developer, although I always feel saying solo developer is probably a little bit misleading, because I don't think anybody really develops games in a bubble, whether it be you're using Creative Commons license type assets in your work, you're bouncing ideas off of friends, you're getting some voice talent to help you, And in my case, I have a friend who helps me with the sound design, and she's working on original music for me. Or you just have a partner or friend or family member who maybe just helps you balance your life to make time for game development. So none of these, or maybe you have, I don't want to say patron because I guess maybe you have some sort of kind of source of income, either directly related to your game development or outside of your game development, that affords you the resources to work on your games. So, but as somebody who has, I guess, like solo creative control over my work, one of the advantages of that is that I can constantly kind of just go back and reevaluate my project as I'm in the middle of it. And now that I'm working on the endings, going back and just making sure that all of the themes that I was trying to work towards are a little bit more clear. As I think as I'm building up to my themes, building around my themes, I tend to play it on the safe side. And honestly, sometimes it takes like getting through the story, getting through the bulk of the material before I really fully even understand all the maybe nuanced ideas that I'm trying to convey. That I can really take a step back and say, you know what, I thought originally I was just trying to subvert this particular genre, but if I really dig deeper and I look at what I created so far, it was more than just like a subversion. It was me also wanting to make this particular comment on, this particular idea. So oftentimes these types of projects also take so long that if I want it to remain kind of a reflection of my ideas or deconstruction of ideas, then it may evolve at some point in development. And I always want to make work that feels like relevant to who I am or how I feel. It has to mean something to me, or else I'm not going to have the motivation to like put in all the hours. It's not going to be so enjoyable for me, and then it's going to start feeling like work, and then I'm not going to be able to derive all the joy and pleasure that I get from developing, and it kind of loses, like for me, because I don't do it for for recognition or for compensation of any kind. If I stop having joy from it, then there's no purpose for it for me anymore. So that is one of the best things I think about working with, I guess, kind of no obligations, is that I can just kind of take it wherever I want. And I'm more of like a by the pants kind of writer. So even though I have kind of like a general idea of where I want the project to go from the beginning, I have these like outlines, and I usually stick fairly close to an outline that's this broad. There will be a lot of details, very important details that will crop up as I spend more time in the world, building the world with the characters, fleshing out all their dialogue. There will be a lot of details that I didn't have going into it. And those are the types of things that I find really interesting as I keep working on it. So I'm not the type of creator who would like write out every single dialogue before I start working on a project. In fact, I won't write out any dialogue, any like final writing until I'm actually like in the scripts themselves. Because if I have it planned out to that level of detail, it's kind of not interesting to me anymore to actually work on. It's like I'm just going through the motions of executing something that's already been finalized in my mind. And for me, that type of creative process feels very laborious. I have to have that kind of like excitement of creating it as I'm working on it from a concept level as well as just executing a plan. So my plans are very loose and broad, and I sort of fill in the details as I go along. This is probably not gonna work for some people, and it certainly is probably not gonna work if you're working in a team where you need to have like everybody kind of working as a unit, turning the gears in a certain direction. Some of the things that I've learned from working on my project, at least my most recent project, I am going to go back and sort of scrap. I don't want to say scrap. I'm going to build Arcane Dice Wars again from the ground up. If I'm honest, everything really needs a rehaul. Now that I've gone through the side game Villain's Heart, where everything feels a lot more focused, I want to go back and restart Arcane Dice Wars with a focus. The scope of it is going to be smaller, and I'm going to kind of pare away a lot of the, I'll call it feature creeping, where I was like, oh, this would be a cool system to add. Let me add these like beasts. Oh, this is a cool thing to add. Like maybe I'm gonna want to like implement pets, which I never got around to. I'm going to really think a little bit about focusing things a little bit more instead of just adding stuff that like I want to play with. And I'm going to make it in scope more around the size of a Villain's Heart. And then if I want to do more with it, then I'll just make it another game. I think it's better for someone like myself to try to develop games that are around like the 1 year development cycle, as far as how my scope goes, because I'm the type of person who, again, I like to experiment with new things. It actually makes it kind of hard for me to retain an audience when I was a comic artist, because I think my comic stories tended to be all over the place. So like if I had a story that took place in like modern day, about like a LGBTQ protagonist, it would attract like a certain group, and then I moved on to like something that was like high fantasy, and then from there I moved on to something that was like a western, and then I moved on for something that was like a more of a horror genre or something like that. So I'm kind of all over the place, because like I don't tend to want to stick to like one idea, because I feel like once I've like explored that idea, I'm like want to move on. My curiosity and my ideas want to take me someplace else, instead of just like sticking into like one genre. So like I think that also happens with like even like these games where I started off a visual novel, and then like my next games were still like visual novels, but I was trying to add like point and click elements to it, but I think they still were too close to a visual novel in some ways to like keep my attention, so I didn't finish them. And now this game, because it has like a turn-based kind of RPG mechanics to it, and then also kind of along with the dungeon exploration and stuff, it gave me something a whole new to like kind of play with and build my story and characters around, that it really like held my attention. And so I think that I have a lot of ideas to do with like these characters in this world I'm building, but I'm already sort of looking into experimenting with Godot. And rather than, I guess, trying to rebuild Arcane Dice Wars, which, with the exact same like mechanics and everything, I think I will still finish Arcane Dice Wars and Renpai, because overall, like, the game still is like so story and narrative heavy that I don't really know that it makes sense to try to put all of this in a different engine, because the the turn-based part and everything's already kind of figured out, I do want to go back and like make the code better and more efficient. And I have been researching some more Python in order to like do that. But overall, like I think I'm just gonna still rebuild Arcane Dice Wars and run Pi again, and then after that, like probably my next game I want to build in Godot, and it will be a completely different type of game. I've been thinking about either maybe a puzzle game or like a card game. But on the horizon is also Procreate Dreams, which I'm super looking forward to because of what I've seen in their conference talk of what it will offer for if it works like I think it's going to work, and there's going to be kind of a very easy transition between doing frame by frame animation and doing kind of like more, I guess, vector style animation with rotation, skew, and deformations and stuff like that. That would be like my dream program. Especially if it's as like intuitive and fun to use as Procreate, because that's really what reignited my love of digital art. So it may end up being that my next project after Arcane Dice Wars, or even maybe my remake of Arcane Dice Wars, it might end up having like a completely different like layout, or I might go back and like change all the animations and stuff if I'm really enjoying Procreate Dreams. So there's a lot of kind of like room to play with things in the future. Yeah, my brain likes to be constantly stimulated, and so if I plan these things out too far in advance or too detailed in advance, then I get bored with it. So I really have to kind of just evolve and go with the flow and analyze problems as they come up. And that's how I keep enjoying. I keep getting my like kind of like chemical hits every time I solve a major problem, and I need that to be sporadically spread out through development, through all different like aspects of it. Like I kept adding different like types of animation to the game. Like originally I started out with just like the portrait sprites that were like kind of on cards, and then the combat sprites, and then I ended up adding like bonding kind of different a shot of the characters when you are having their like more intimate bond conversations. And then for Arcane Dice Wars, the Villain's Heart, I added another type of like bonding sprite, because like even just doing the same type of art asset over and over again gets kind of like boring to me, so I have to keep introducing like new things to that as well. And it can't be something that I just planned from the beginning, because then it feels like going through a checklist and like and just checking off the boxes, and that's like really not that interesting for me. Like coming up with these things and adding these things as I'm working on something, it sort of makes me feel good as I'm doing it, because I know that I'm adding optional content. I'm taking it to another level of polish that feels like I'm going a step beyond what I was initially planning. And that somehow feels more rewarding to me than just like making that barrier or making that requirement from the get-go. So I guess like what I'm really trying to say is like start off with what you think is going to be like the bare bone minimum, and then give yourself permission to add to that as you're going through the project. At least that's what keeps things interesting and fun for me as I'm developing. Okay, well, I think this video is probably long enough, and I don't know if that answered any questions or was helpful to anybody, but that is my approach, and that is how I motivate myself to, I guess, work on it, play with it as much as I do. And I've always been a proponent of my approach to like skill building, and like artistry as don't do what other people tell you to do if you don't enjoy it. Because if you don't enjoy that approach, then it's going to feel like you're forcing yourself, and it's going to become harder and harder to stick to it. And you're probably not going to make as much progress as you would if you would just do it in a way that's enjoyable for you, because I think that's when we grow the most, is when we just spend the most time with it. Maybe I'm the type of person who I always want to get better. I'm going to get bored if I just sit here and I do the same thing over and over again. So I've never been afraid of like that kind of idea that, oh, if you're not trying to like, if you're not struggling, if you're not forcing yourself to get out of your comfort box, that you're going to get stagnant and you're like not going to get any better. Like, I've never been satisfied with just staying where I am anyways. Like, that to me is like not interesting and not fun. So what makes learning and creating interesting is always trying new things. And it's when you're in some sort of like a discipline mode where it's like, I have to do it a certain way and I have to do it this way, that it becomes work instead of play. All right. Well, now I'm really done. Have a good weekend. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to enjoy the process. Bye.